throughout the course of the week, though. This is about how much clout the draft prospects can gain against, for some of them, for a lot of them from all over the country, against a higher level of competition than they may have seen against in their respective conferences. Who, I guess, John, if you had to, regardless of position, because I know we will get into the criticism of certain positions and just a general lack of impressive prospects here this week, who do you think has helped themselves the most through the 4 sessions that we were able to watch?
Yeah, it's a good question because obviously a lot of guys have, but I think whenever you go in and there's any question about who the best player is and then you clearly establish yourself as the best player, it's a huge boost. And that's what Florida State edge rusher Jermaine Johnson did this week. I felt like he was just kind of head and shoulders the best player even here, not let alone edge rusher. It just felt like he was on a different level athletically. His motor, his energy, and his size is unbelievable. I mean, 6'4", 259 pounds. He's got super long arms. You know, he just looks like a freak, and got to talk to him, and it was great to see his mindset, and I feel like he's got his head on. They're going to be really impressed by him. Yeah, he was the guy that don't really need to just go prepare for the combine. He was probably the player that stood out more than anybody else as the guy who moved his way up the board.
Oh, yeah, we felt like we were all sitting there at the end of the final session yesterday, just being like, get him out of there. Enough. We've seen enough. He's done enough damage.
Right.
To these offensive linemen to prove that he is, in a class in and of himself here in Mobile. But with the rest of this, John, the strength seems to be the interior, both of the offensive line and the defensive line. We've seen some really, really impressive guys on the interior D-line specifically, and not necessarily a need here in Tennessee, but of the names that you came in, of the names that you've studied and guys that you know to be hugely talented players, who I guess impressed you the most from a technical standpoint? Because it didn't seem like we didn't see a whole lot of guys with the ability to create and generate the kind of interior pass rush that such a premium is placed on in the NFL nowadays. But from a prospect standpoint, what do you like about the traits of some of this interior defensive linemen who were in attendance?
Yeah, I mean, Travis Jones from Connecticut stood out for sure, just his size and strength, but ability to play low despite being a 6'4" guy. You know, I think that speaks volumes in his frame. You know, he carried 330 pounds, and he carries it very well. And so I think that he unlocked some things for himself this week. I think he could have bull rushed probably everybody there all day and just planted guys, but he actually tried to use moves and push pull and swim guys a little bit. So it was encouraging to see. He's never going to be a dynamic pass rusher, I don't think. But can he be a consistent run stuffer who can push the pocket at least and create a little bit of pressure on passing downs? If he can be that, I think he'll be a second-round pick the way he was playing this week and the way he looks on tape. So he's one. And then the other two guys with probably more upside and maybe to their game, but maybe not quite as much consistency. Devontae Wyatt from Georgia, who has a little bit of that pass rush juice, a little bit of that burst off the ball that you love to see from 3 technique. And he weighed in pretty good, too. I think he was 308. So, you know, he measured really well, I think, and he had a pretty good couple days, too. I think teams are going to be also impressed by him. Lots of energy for him during the interview process, and locker room guy, team guy. I think he seemed like he would have a really good presence at the next level. And then I think the other guy who came out of nowhere for me anyway was Oklahoma's Perion Winfrey. Yesterday had a really good practice, and even the day before was flashing a little bit. And he's kind of more of the pass rush juice that you're talking about he has. I think his biggest questions are going to come in run defense. Can he hold up? I think he was listed at like 292 pounds at Oklahoma, but he weighed in at 303 at the Senior Bowl and then still played well and looked like a pretty dominant player physically and athletically. So really good signs for him, I think, that he was able to show those things despite being heavier. Can he keep that weight on? Can he keep the bulk on? Can he improve the technique? There's going to be questions for him, but he worked his way into being a top 100 consideration.
86-inch wingspan for Perion Winfrey, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. He's a pterodactyl out there playing on the interior defensive line. John Ledyard of Pewter Report is our guest. At Ledyard NFL Draft is where you can follow him. He's one of the finest out here scouting prospects, a must follow as you get ready for the draft. Now, you and I were standing next to each other when we probably saw the most impressive wide receiver play of the Senior Bowl to that point, with two Vols going up against each other in competition in one-on-one drills. Velus Jones Jr. with just a spectacular adjustment to a bad ball that I believe was thrown by Bailey Zappi, if I recall correctly, the quarterback out of Western Kentucky. He was on Alante Taylor was on him, and the play made by Jones was spectacular. But outside of that, like, the consistency is something that he struggled with throughout the course of the last 2 days, John.
Yeah, he is a really tricky player to figure out, Velus Jones. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's clearly fast. I mean, his mile per hour speeds were clocked. He looks fast. He has that return ability, obviously, and that might be where he makes his money in the NFL, to be honest. It is highly unusual and very uncommon. In fact, I don't know if it's even happened for a receiver. He'll be 25 years old in May. For a receiver that'll be 25 years old at draft time that has never had a 1,000-yard season in college football to become this really productive, consistent NFL player, it seems like a long shot for him. But there's talent there. There's no question about that. I'm excited to see how he tests. He's at his age, I mean, to be 25 at draft day, it's very uncommon. He's got some injury history. There's some things that definitely warrant some concern with him. Obviously, transfer for USC, Tennessee, and then finally being productive, relatively so, this past year. Put him on the Senior Bowls map, kind of out of nowhere. And so I'm just curious to see how he tests. And, I don't think he's going to be a top 100 pick, but I'm curious to see how teams evaluate him at all kind of moving forward. Is he a guy that they feel is draftable or not, just because of being so much older than the average prospect? You get later in the draft and you think he can help you, okay, but how much of last season's 800 yards, which was the first time he'd gone over 280 yards in a season before, how much of that was just because he was playing up against 19-year-olds and he's 24? That matters too in the terms of the evaluation. So the analytics probably will not be kind to him, and with good reason, but there's no question that at the Senior Bowl he showed a lot of impressive talent. Catching the football consistently was a real adventure for him, and that has to probably change. Again, if you have all those other red flags, you've got to probably be pretty dominant in the other areas that you can control. And right now I think we've got still a decent amount of question marks for him moving forward.
I laughed out loud, kind of scrolling through your Twitter timeline to make sure that I had the right line of questioning today. And I got to your tweet about the worst kept secret in Mobile with a picture of Mike Tomlin sitting next to Liberty quarterback Malik Willis, a side-by-side that Jim Nagy had tweeted out. Expand why that is the worst kept secret in Mobile, Alabama this week.
Well, I had so many people tell me throughout the week that I had people early in the week and then even late last night telling me, I think, by the way, I know you're a Steeler guy. I think Tomlin really likes Malik Willis. That's the buzz here, is that he really likes him. And then I didn't expect the director of the Senior Bowl to tweet it out and basically tell everybody. But once that happened, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm just going to be honest. This is the worst kept secret in Mobile. Everybody knows this. Now, I mean, it could be smoke. Who knows? I mean, obviously, the Steelers are going to have interest in the top quarterback in the draft. Malik Willis is clearly one of those guys in this class. And, Tomlin has raved about mobility for the last 2 years at the quarterback position, and he's seen it.
I wonder why.
Right. Right. And obviously it's recent Ben that's made him wish for mobility again, but also, peak Ben was extremely mobile and able to make plays on the move. And that's always been something that Tomlin's really, really valued. I don't think he necessarily needs a runner at quarterback, but somebody who can scramble and get out of structure and make plays. Absolutely. That's something that they want, that they just don't have, and Mason Rudolph does not provide. And so he's really looking at that pretty seriously, I think. And so obviously Willis checks that box, but so does Sam Howell from UNC, and a consideration for Pittsburgh as well. And they'll look at all these guys pretty quick. Kenny Pickett right in their backyard, but doesn't have a lot of the traits I think that they're looking for. So they're not afraid to take a slow path as a developmental guy, and that's Lee Willis and Howell to some extent as well. So we'll see what they do.
Now, John Ledyard of Pewter Report here with us on 104.5 The Zone. At Ledyard NFL Draft is where you can follow him for all of his great insights and analysis. The quarterback who did themselves the biggest disservice this week, from your standpoint, as far as what you've watched, understanding that day one, new receivers, day two, we're out there standing in a rainstorm, they're trying to play football in it. Who do you think did themselves the most disservice through the first 4 sessions at the quarterback position?
Well, this was a heated competition, Buck, between a lot of guys who were trying to do themselves a disservice. No, I'm kidding. It was rough. It wasn't necessarily pretty, but I would say that Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder probably the most to lose. Bailey Zappi hasn't been great, but he made a couple plays here and there, and he probably was the lowest ranked guy for most people of the 6 going into this week. So I think seeing Desmond Ridder struggle with accuracy consistently, that was a big question for him coming in. Also struggled with some of the taking handoffs from under center and the dropbacks, the footwork, and opening up to the sideline, throwing accurately. It all looked uncomfortable for him, to be honest. And Malik Willis had some of those concerns as well. He fumbled a bunch of snaps, and so there's a learning curve for all these guys. Nobody sold the show. Willis and Howell had some good throws. Pickett just feels like the ceiling is really low. He had some bad throws too. Carson Strong is truly all over the place. So I wouldn't know if any of these dudes helped themselves, but I think Ridder is the one that probably lost the most steam from this week.
Now, I trust your analysis more than most because you are not shy about how few first-round draft grades you're willing to give out when you go through the full process that you do each and every time this season. Are we at the point right now where you have a number on how many players you would be willing to give a first-round draft grade?
I don't have that number right now because I'm just getting out of the Buck season, and I still got a lot of tape to watch and a lot of evaluation to go. That I probably will wait until probably just a couple weeks before the draft maybe to release kind of how many of those I have. So I'll go through that evaluation process in full, obviously, but the buzz here is absolutely from people who have been watching guys and studying prospects and are in the league and all of it, is that this draft class leaves something to be desired for sure. And not in every position, but there's some good players in this class, but there aren't a lot of great players in this class. And so I think that right now, that's how a lot of teams are seeing it. We get through the combine process. Sometimes that changes. I've seen that change in past drafts, and the sentiment comes around a little bit. But this is not billed as the best draft class in a long time. And some of that's the quarterbacks. They carry a lot of buzz. And this year just isn't a very good quarterback class. And so we'll see who emerges from that. I would say the only guy from this week, from the Senior Bowl, that is likely to go in the first round would be Florida State's Jermaine Johnson, and then there's some other guys with possibilities to go in the first round. But none of the running backs, none of the wide receivers, maybe Colorado State tight end Trey McBride. We'll see. Again, I think that would still be a little bit of a jump for him maybe. If the quarterbacks go there, it's almost by default, So it's that kind of usually offense is the buzz thing, right, for the draft. And at the Senior Bowl at least, there weren't. Some of these quarterbacks will go there, but other than that, there were not a lot of offensive players. The guard from Boston College, Zion Johnson, has a shot to go in the first round. Maybe somebody reaches for an athletic tackle, but there are not many offensive players in the Senior Bowl who would normally carry the buzz that are going to end up in the first round.
They desperately need a tight end here in Tennessee, John. And Trey McBride, Jeremy Ruckert, both down here. As you mentioned, Trey McBride from Colorado State, and then Jeremy Ruckert, of course, the Ohio State tight end. What kind of stands out about those two, and where are the differences in their game? What do they excel at? What are their weaknesses at this point based on what you've seen in the tape that you've been able to watch of those two?
I think Ruckert is just opportunity. This was a big week for him because people want to see him as a kind of more of a featured aspect of offense, or just in general what he does is a heavily targeted receiver. So the game will be big for him too, I actually think, on Saturday. So it'll be interesting to see what he can provide there. In practice, I thought he was fine. Other people watched him more than I did and really liked him. I know a couple Jets guys I was talking to, not Jets personnel people, but Jets media people were like, yeah, that's a player we really like in Jeremy Ruckert. So, he seems like he could be working his way into conversation, be maybe a second-round pick. We'll see how the testing goes. That's the big thing. It's going to be the big thing for McBride, too. Is he special athletically, or is he just a guy athletically? And then if so, is he already at his ceiling? We know he will block. He's physical and ferocious in that way. He makes contested catches. But there is definitely another level to this thing that has to be considered in terms of what the ceiling is. And if you're taking a tight end ceiling, you do not want to end up with Hayden Hurst, in the first round. It's a mistake.
No.
And so you have to be careful about what you're doing when you're evaluating that position, because it's been proven that a lot of the time later in the draft you can find really capable tight ends. And there are only a few game-changing tight ends in the NFL. So if you are envisioning that guy when you take a player in the first round, most of the time you're going to be wrong. And if they're not a special athlete, then you're almost certainly going to be wrong. And so that's going to be the big part of the process for Ruckert and McBride and some of these other guys that they're going to have to answer during the combine.
Listen. I'm so willing to let them overdraft to tight end just to have somebody who can actually block capably and be a reliable relief valve, basically, for a quarterback who is consistently under duress here in Tennessee. John Ledyard of Pewter Report has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. John, it's always good to see you, buddy. I appreciate you hanging out with me on the radio, and it was good to hang out with you at the Senior Bowl. I promise you we will go out to dinner at the Combine. You're on the hook now because you know I'm going to harass you again when I'm out there on Radio Row.